The rain fell in thin silver sheets against the cracked windows of the old cargo bay, the sound echoing through the silent station like distant whispers. The lights flickered every few seconds, making the shadows stretch and shrink as if the entire place was breathing. In the middle of the wide metal floor stood Commander Ralvik of the Kortai Empire, staring at the human sitting calmly on a broken crate. The human's clothes were torn, his hands still bound, yet he looked strangely relaxed. Too relaxed. It unsettled Ralvik more than he wanted to admit. The Kortai Empire had ruled this part of space for over 1,000 years. They had crushed rebellions, burned worlds, and silenced entire species without hesitation. Their power had no rival. Their ships filled the sky wherever they went. Their armies were feared even by those who had never seen them. But none of that explained why a single human was smiling right now, at this moment, inside a station controlled by the strongest empire the galaxy had ever known. Ralvik folded his arms as he studied the human. "You should not be smiling," he said, his voice echoing in the cold room. "Your fleet has been destroyed. Your people have no way to reach you. You are alone. And yet you smile. Why?" The human tilted his head a little, like someone listening to a quiet joke. "Because you think I'm alone," he said softly. Ralvik frowned. The human's voice was calm, too calm, like someone with nothing to fear. Ralvik had interrogated many prisoners before. They cried. They begged. They screamed. But this one simply sat there with a light, almost friendly smile. A smile that made the commander's skin crawl. "You have no army," Ralvik insisted. "Your escape pod was found drifting. No human ship could have followed you without our sensors noticing." "I know," the human replied. "That's the point." Ralvik felt a strange tension rise inside him. The human's words did not sound like a threat, they sounded like a promise of something that had already begun. He took a step closer. "Explain." The human looked up into Ralvik's dark, reptilian eyes. He didn't blink. He didn't look worried. He simply smiled wider. "You ever hear the saying humans have? It only takes one spark to burn down a forest?" Ralvik narrowed his eyes. "We burned your forests. That's why we stopped planting trees," the human replied, as if sharing a casual fact. "We started planting ideas instead." Ralvik didn't understand. And he hated not understanding. The empire thrived on clarity, order, control. But the human's words felt like fog, soft, quiet, yet hiding something massive beneath it. He turned away for a moment, trying to regain control of the situation. The rain outside struck the walls harder, as if reacting to the tension inside. "What is your name?" Ralvik asked, turning back sharply. "Elias," the human answered. "Elias," Ralvik repeated, tasting the name. "Tell me why you were smiling when we caught you." Elias shrugged lightly. "Because the moment you opened my escape pod, the timer started." Ralvik stiffened. "Timer?" Hum," Elias said with a soft hum. "You didn't think humans would just drift into enemy territory without a plan, right? That would be stupid." Ralvik reached for the console on his wrist. "What timer? Speak clearly." Elias leaned back a little, still smiling. "A signal. A very short signal. So short, your scanners probably didn't notice it. It already went out." Ralvik froze, then pressed a command into his wrist console. "Station control, run a full scan for unauthorized transmissions in the last hour." There was static for a moment. Then the voice of the station tech spoke. "Commander. There was a micro-burst transmission at 1900 hours. Less than a millisecond. We assumed it was interference." "It wasn't," Elias said quietly. Ralvik felt his heart beat faster. "What did you send?" "Coordinates," Elias replied. Ralvik's blood turned cold. "Coordinates of what?" "Not what," Elias said. "Who?" Before Ralvik could respond, the lights of the station flickered again, once, twice, then went out completely. The room fell into darkness. Only the faint glow of the rain-lit windows gave shape to the shadows. Ralvik's voice echoed sharply. "Backup power, online." But no lights came back. Instead, a new sound filled the room, a low vibration from deep inside the station. It was slow, steady, and growing. Elias exhaled softly. "Right on time." Ralvik pulled out his sidearm. "What did you bring here, human?" Elias did not move. He did not flinch. He simply smiled again, calm and confident, even in the dark. "You've ruled the galaxy for 1,000 years. You think that will protect you from what you can't predict." The vibration grew louder. Not mechanical. Not natural. Something else. Something alive. "What is that sound?" Ralvik demanded. Elias leaned forward slightly, eyes shining in the dim light. That, Commander, is the beginning of the end of your empire. The station trembled. An alarm began to scream. Ralvik spun toward the door, but before he could move another step, a deep, distant roar echoed across the station, nothing like any ship engine or weapon he had ever heard. Elias smiled brighter. And Ralvik finally realized the thing humans feared most was exactly what the Kortai had never expected. A single human with a plan. The roar shook the walls again, deeper this time, as if something massive had awakened somewhere inside the station. Commander Ralvik forced himself to stay calm, but he could feel the fear crawling under his skin. He had never heard a sound like that. It was not a weapon charging. It was not a reactor failing. It was something alive, but far too large to be inside a station built for normal-sized beings. Elias watched him with steady eyes. The human smile was no longer playful. It was knowing. Confident. As if he were watching a story unfold exactly as he expected. Ralvik aimed his weapon at the human. Tell me what you brought here. Tell me now. Elias tilted his head slightly. Why would I ruin the surprise? The station shook again, this time hard enough for metal dust to fall from the ceiling. Ralvik staggered but kept the weapon raised. He used his free hand to tap his wrist console, but the display only flashed red. No connection. No signal. As if the station had been swallowed by silence. Elias noticed. Your systems won't help you. Not anymore. Ralvik stepped forward angrily. If you think whatever you brought can harm the Kortai Empire, you are mistaken. We have crushed fleets. We have ended star systems. Nothing your kind has created could. It's not something we created, Elias said calmly. Ralvik stopped speaking. The roar came again, closer this time. A few seconds later, the metal floor under their feet trembled in a slow, steady rhythm, like footsteps, giant footsteps, coming from the lower decks. Ralvik felt his throat tighten. Impossible. Nothing could have entered this station without our sensors. Unless it wasn't trying to enter, Elias interrupted. Unless it was already here. Ralvik turned slowly toward him. Explain. Elias looked at the rain-streaked windows. Outside, the storm pressed against the station like a living thing. Your empire collects species. Rare creatures. Dangerous ones. You take them from their worlds and keep them in cages. You experiment on them. You don't care who suffers, as long as your empire becomes stronger. Ralvik showed no reaction, but his eyes flickered, just for a moment. Elias continued, his voice still soft but colder now. Humans study your empire too. Every move. Every habit. Every weakness. We know about your vaults. Your labs, your testing chambers. And we know about the creature you found on Taros 4. Ralvik's jaw locked. How do you know that name? Because you should never have taken it, Elias said. You didn't understand what it was. You didn't listen to the warnings carved into the stones around its resting place. You thought it was just another beast. Something to break. Something to use. Ralvik stepped back without realizing. It was contained. That creature cannot escape its cell. Elias smiled again, slow this time. Not alone. Ralvik looked at him sharply. What did you do? The micro-signal I sent? Elias said. It wasn't to call anyone here. It was to unlock every door between that creature and this room. Ralvik felt the blood drain from his face. You released it? I freed it, Elias corrected. Before Ralvik could react, the door at the far end of the cargo bay shuddered. A long dent pushed outward from the other side, bending the thick metal panel. The dent grew deeper, the metal groaning under enormous pressure. Ralvik raised his weapon. Human, do you understand what you've done? That creature will kill you too. Elias didn't seem concerned. Maybe. Maybe not. But I know what it will definitely kill. The next impact shattered the door. Metal tore open like thin cloth, screeching across the room. Darkness filled the doorway, thick and heavy. Then a pair of enormous, glowing eyes opened inside that darkness, bright, sharp, and full of hate. Ralvik froze where he stood. Every instinct in his body screamed to flee. Those eyes were old. Ancient. They radiated a cold hunger that went beyond simple violence. It was a predator's gaze, focused entirely on him. The creature stepped through the ruined doorway. Its body was massive, built of muscle and shadow, covered in scales that shimmered faintly under the emergency lights. Its claws dug into the floor, leaving deep marks with every step. Its breath came out in slow, heavy waves, filling the air with a low rumbling sound like rolling thunder. Elias watched it with quiet respect, as if greeting an old friend. Ralvik's hand trembled. This thing. This thing is dangerous even to humans. Elias nodded. Yes. But humans learned something long ago. Sometimes, you don't fight monsters by killing them. You fight monsters by setting the right one free. The creature shifted its massive head toward Elias, sniffed once, then turned back to Ralvik. It seemed to sense exactly who had caused its suffering. Ralvik fired his weapon directly at its chest. The shot hit, but the creature barely reacted. It only tilted its head, as if annoyed. Run, Elias said calmly. Ralvik didn't hesitate. He turned and sprinted toward the emergency exit. Behind him, the creature roared, loud enough to shake the entire station. Metal screamed as it charged after him, claws tearing into the floor. Elias rose from the crate, stretching his arms slowly as he watched the chaos unfold. The station lights flickered back on for a brief second, reflecting off the ruins of the torn door, and Elias felt a quiet satisfaction. The 1,000-year empire had finally met something it could not control. And it all started with one human and one smile. Alarm screamed through the station as Commander Ralvik ran down the hallway, his claws scraping against the metal floor. The lights flickered red and white, turning the corridor into a stuttering nightmare of shadows. Behind him, the thunder of the creature's steps grew louder, shaking dust from every ceiling panel. The air felt heavier with every second, filled with its hot, snarling breath. Ralvik had faced death before. He had stood on battlefields and watched ships burn in orbit. But he had never felt fear this sharp or this pure. The creature was not simply chasing him, it was hunting him, and it moved with terrible purpose, as if every step brought it closer to something it had waited centuries to destroy. He tried to reach station control again, but his wrist console still flashed only red symbols. The creature's presence was interfering with their systems. Or maybe the human had done more than he admitted. Ralvik cursed under his breath. Elias. A single human had caused all of this. One man, with a smile like a knife. Ralvik didn't understand how one person could plan something so dangerous, so reckless, yet so perfectly timed. He turned a corner sharply, nearly slipping on the smooth floor. Behind him, the creature slammed into the wall, tearing out a chunk of metal with one swipe as it followed. Ralvik sprinted toward the emergency bulkhead and slammed his palm onto the keypad. The door hissed and began to slide shut. The creature lunged. Its claws slid under the lowering door, forcing it upward with incredible strength. Metal groaned and bent. Ralvik stared in horror as the creature forced its huge body through the narrowing space, scales scraping against steel. Its eyes glowed brighter, filled with a burning promise of revenge. Ralvik fired his weapon again, aiming for the eyes. The creature twisted its head aside with impossible speed. The shots hit the wall, melting holes through it. The bulkhead finally collapsed behind the creature, crushing part of its tail. It roared in pain, shaking the walls, but Ralvik was already running again. He needed to get to the armory or command deck. He needed soldiers, weapons, anything that could slow the monster now stalking him. But deep down, he wondered if anything could. Meanwhile, back in the cargo bay, Elias walked calmly toward the open doorway. The creature's roar echoed through the station, but he didn't flinch. Instead, he listened to the sound with quiet focus, as if tracking its movement by its voice alone. He had not wanted this creature to suffer. He had not wanted the core tie to experiment on something they didn't understand. But they had done it anyway. They always did. For 1,000 years, the Empire believed nothing could touch them. They believed every species they conquered was weak. Predictable. Breakable. But they had never met this creature. And they had underestimated humans even more. Elias reached the hallway and began walking at a steady pace, not rushed, not worried. He had timed everything carefully. The creature would chase Ralvik, and Ralvik would lead it exactly where Elias needed it to go. Humans had a strange talent for surviving by planning 10 steps ahead, especially when the enemy believed they were dealing with simple, emotional creatures. Elias reached a junction and paused. To his right, the lights flickered. The sound of panicked voices echoed from deeper in the station. Core Thai soldiers finally realized something had gone wrong. He turned left. Not long after, 2 Core Thai guards spotted him. They raised their weapons instantly. Human. Stop. Hands where? Elias didn't stop. He lifted one hand slightly, palm open, almost polite. You should run, he said. The guards exchanged confused looks. One stepped forward. Stop moving or we will. The roar hit them like a physical force, shaking the air. The guards stumbled, their weapons lowering. The entire hallway trembled as the creature slammed into a wall somewhere nearby, tearing through it like wet paper. Elias stepped past them while they panicked. One tried to grab him, but the floor beneath them cracked. A second roar tore through the metal structure, louder and nearer, and the guards instantly bolted the other way, shouting for backup. Elias continued walking. Further ahead, Ralvik burst into the command deck. Officers scrambled around, trying to restore control to the station systems. Sparks shot from a nearby console. Another panel exploded, blowing out a shower of lights. Seal all gates. Ralvik ordered. Activate internal defenses. Turn the sentry turrets toward. His voice broke off as the main door crumpled like paper. The creature stepped inside the command deck. Officers screamed and scattered. Two fired their weapons, beams of bright energy bouncing uselessly off the creature's thick scales. One tried to activate a barrier shield, but the creature swiped him aside before he reached the console. Ralvik backed away slowly. His weapon shook in his hand. No, he whispered. Elias entered the room a moment later. He leaned on the broken doorway, breathing evenly, as if he had just taken a peaceful walk instead of orchestrating the destruction of an entire station. Ralvik turned toward him, furious and terrified. You think this will win your kind of war? You think releasing a monster changes anything? Elias stepped forward. No. It's not about war. The creature moved closer to Ralvik, its breath hot and heavy. Elias continued. It's about making your empire understand what it feels like to be powerless. To know fear. To face something you can't control. Ralvik raised his weapon one last time, but his hand shook too much to aim. Elias looked into his eyes and spoke gently, almost sadly. That is what ends empires, Commander. Not armies. Not weapons. Fear. The creature roared, louder than anything before. Ralvik finally understood why the human had smiled. And then the creature lunged out. The creature struck with terrifying force, sending Commander Ralvik crashing across the room. He slammed into a console, metal panels breaking under his weight. Sparks exploded around him as he slid to the floor, gasping for breath. His vision blurred, and a sharp pain burned across his ribs. The command deck filled with screams as Core TIE officers tried to escape through side doors, but the creature blocked the main exit with its huge body. Its glowing eyes searched for movement, hunting anything that reminded it of its long imprisonment. Elias stepped carefully into the room, watching the chaos around him. Officers pushed each other aside in panic. One grabbed a fallen blaster, only for the creature to swat it away with a single huge paw. The weapon skidded across the floor and disappeared into the smoke rising from a broken console. The scent of burnt wires filled the air. Ralvik tried to stand, but his legs shook and gave out. The creature's attention turned back to him, as if recognizing the one who had harmed it the most. It lowered its massive head, growling deep in its throat. The sound vibrated through the metal floor and into Ralvik's bones. He felt small for the first time in his life. Truly small. Enough, Elias said quietly. The creature hesitated. Its eyes flicked toward the human. Elias did not raise his voice. He simply stood with calm posture, as if speaking to a wounded animal instead of a towering predator. The creature took one slow step back, its claws scraping the floor. Ralvik stared at Elias with disbelief. You control it? No one controls it, Elias said. But it understands me. Ralvik shook his head weakly. Impossible. That thing is nothing but rage. It has no reason. No mind. You only think that because you never bothered to learn, Elias replied. Your empire never tries to understand anything. You only break it until it fits your needs. The creature rumbled again, as if agreeing. Ralvik gritted his teeth, anger pushing through his pain. You humans think you're clever. But this will not matter. This is one station. One creature. The empire stretches across 1,000 worlds. You cannot scare us all. Elias walked closer to him. You're wrong. Fear spreads faster than armies. A loud crash echoed from the hallway outside the command deck. The walls shook again. More screaming followed. The officers who had escaped earlier rushed back into the room, not bravely, but desperately. Behind them came a wave of smoke and fire. Something was collapsing out there. Ralvik forced himself upright, leaning on a broken console. What else did you do? Elias glanced toward the burning hallway. When you unlocked the creature for your experiments, you disturbed a lot more than you realized. This station wasn't built strong enough to hold it forever. Your people reinforced the walls, but they forgot something. What? Ralvik demanded. That everything has a breaking point, Elias said. Ralvik opened his mouth to argue, but the sound of twisting metal cut him off. A huge crack ran across the ceiling. The lights flickered wildly, then died completely. Only the red emergency lines along the floor stayed lit, casting long shadows across the room. The creature growled again, this time more defensive than angry. Its scales reflected the red lights like dark armor. Station integrity failing, a computer voice announced through a damaged speaker. Structural collapse imminent. All personnel evacuate immediately. A young Corps TIE officer stumbled forward. Commander. Escape pods. A loud explosion blew open the far wall. Fire spilled into the room. The officer was thrown into the air, crashing into the ground with a sharp cry. Ralvik stared at the flames in shock. The pods. They're gone? Elias nodded once. The creature passed through that deck earlier. I'm afraid nothing survived. Ralvik's breath hitched. Then we will die here. Maybe, Elias said softly. Maybe not. The creature lowered its head toward Elias, waiting. Ralvik stared. You're leaving. Elias turned toward the emergency ladder leading to the upper maintenance tubes. Yes. And you can come with me if you want. Or you can stay here and let your empire pretend this never happened. Your choice. Ralvik's pride screamed at him to refuse. He was a commander of the empire. A symbol of its power. But another explosion rocked the station, tearing away any illusion of safety. Flames spread across the room, licking at the ceiling. The creature growled at the fire, backing away slightly. Ralvik's voice trembled. Why? Why would you save me? Elias paused and looked back at him. Because endings only matter if someone remembers them. And you will remember this one. Ralvik hesitated, staring at the burning command deck. His empire felt distant now. Smaller. Weak. He finally nodded. Elias turned and began climbing the ladder. Ralvik followed slowly, gripping the rungs with shaking hands. The creature watched them for a moment, then moved to guard the ladder's base, ensuring no panicked officer followed. As they climbed higher into the narrow tube, the station groaned loudly beneath them. A long crack raced across the floor below. Smoke filled the air, forcing Ralvik to cough. Where are we going? Ralvik asked between breaths. To the roof, Elias answered. I arranged for something to pick us up. Ralvik frowned. What something? Elias smiled again, though Ralvik couldn't see it. A friend. Behind them, the station structure finally began to fail. The sound was like the roar of a dying world. And above them, the storm outside waited. The ladder rattled under their feet as Elias and Ralvik climbed higher into the maintenance shaft. The lights above flickered weakly, and the sound of the station's structure crumbling grew louder with every passing second. Ralvik felt his heart racing, the heat from the flames below and the tremors of the collapsing station making the air feel thick and oppressive. The creature was still down there, guarding the way behind them, but that didn't mean they were safe. If the station collapsed before they could reach the roof, they would be trapped. Faster, Elias said, his voice calm despite the chaos surrounding them. We don't have much time. Ralvik glanced at him, still struggling to understand the human. How could Elias remain so calm in the face of certain death? The creature, the station falling apart, the fire spreading, they should have terrified him, should have sent him into a frenzy. But instead, he was acting like this was just another day. Ralvik gripped the ladder harder, pulling himself upward. You're not human, he muttered under his breath. Elias didn't respond immediately. For a moment, the only sound was their breath and the creaking of the station. Then, finally, Elias spoke, his voice just loud enough to be heard above the noise. No, he said softly. I'm more than human. Ralvik narrowed his eyes but said nothing. He didn't understand. He had never met anyone like Elias before. The human didn't behave like other prisoners he had interrogated. He didn't beg. He didn't plead. He didn't even seem afraid. He simply acted. The hatch at the top of the shaft was close now. Ralvik could see the faint light of the storm outside shining through the cracks in the metal. But as they neared the top, a loud, hollow crash shook the entire shaft. The walls shuddered as if the station itself had taken a deep breath before exhaling its last. Ralvik's hand slipped for a second as the ladder swayed violently, but he regained his grip just in time. The station was collapsing faster than he had expected. We need to move, Elias said, already at the top, his hands on the hatch. This is going to be a lot harder if we're caught in the middle of it. Ralvik climbed faster, ignoring the strain in his muscles. Whatever Elias had planned, he needed to trust him now. There were no other options left. With a loud screech, Elias wrenched the hatch open, stepping out into the stormy air above. Ralvik followed, feeling the sharp wind cut against his skin. The rain was coming down in sheets, and the storm outside seemed to match the chaos inside the station. Dark clouds swirled above them, crackling with electricity, while below, the station was beginning to break apart. Pieces of metal were falling into the void, disappearing into the thick clouds below. The roof of the station was exposed, a small platform surrounded by the storm. Elias turned to Ralvik, his expression unchanged. We don't have much time. Ralvik could barely hear him over the wind, but he nodded. His mind raced, trying to make sense of everything. What was Elias doing? What could one human possibly have arranged to save them? And what was his game? Was there something else behind this? A trap? A scheme? Before he could ask, a shape emerged from the darkness. At first, Ralvik thought it was another piece of the station breaking off, but then he saw it clearly, a ship, descending rapidly toward them. It was not a Kortai ship. It wasn't even a design he recognized. The craft was sleek, almost alien in appearance, its body shimmering with a strange metallic surface that seemed to shift with the storm's lighting. It hovered above them for a moment, the wind pushing it slightly off course, before it lowered gently to the roof. Ralvik stood frozen, his mind trying to process what he was seeing. What is that? Elias smiled, though the storm made it difficult to see. Like I said, a friend. The ship's engines hummed softly, almost in harmony with the wind. A hatch opened at the side, and a figure emerged. It was tall, with an angular silhouette that immediately made Ralvik uneasy. The figure was wearing a long, flowing cloak that seemed to ripple in the storm's wind, and its face, if it could be called a face, was obscured by a dark visor. Its eyes glowed faintly, like stars behind glass. Elias didn't hesitate. He stepped toward the figure, a brief nod of acknowledgement between them. The figure, in turn, raised one hand, as if beckoning them forward. Ralvik watched in silence, still unsure what to make of it all. Was this some kind of secret alliance between the human and whatever this was? Was this the moment Elias had been leading them toward all along? Are you going to just stand there? Elias called back to him. Or do you want to live? Ralvik shook himself from his stupor and hurried forward. As he approached, the figure lowered its hand, stepping aside to allow them into the ship. Elias entered first, without a glance back, but Ralvik hesitated for a moment. The storm was growing fiercer, and the station beneath them was now visibly breaking apart. He took a step forward, but then, just as he was about to enter the ship, a familiar voice reached his ears. A voice that sent a cold shiver down his spine. Commander Ralvik. Ralvik's head snapped toward the edge of the platform, where a small group of Kortai soldiers had appeared, desperately trying to make their way across the rooftop. The storm had made it nearly impossible to see them, but Ralvik recognized the voices, his soldiers, the ones who had been on his command deck. They were alive, but barely. Their uniforms were torn, their movement sluggish. They were too far to reach in time. Ralvik's heart twisted, but the figure inside the ship spoke again. Now, Commander. Ralvik turned back to the ship. There was no time left. His soldiers would be lost, and there was nothing he could do. The choice was simple: stay and die with the Empire, or leave with the human and the mystery of what was coming next. He turned away from the soldiers and entered the ship, sealing the hatch behind him. The ship's engines roared to life, lifting them up into the storm. As they ascended, Ralvik looked back one last time at the station that had once been the heart of the Kortai Empire. Pieces of it were falling away now, like a dying giant, and somewhere, deep within, Elias was already planning the next step of their revolution. The ship sliced through the storm with ease, its engines humming steadily as it climbed higher into the dark clouds. Ralvik sat silently in one of the cushioned seats, still processing everything that had happened in the past few hours. The Kortai Empire, his empire, was crumbling. The station had fallen. His soldiers were lost. The creature, released by the human, had destroyed everything in its path. And now, he was sitting in a ship with that same human, Elias, who had set all of this in motion. Elias sat across from him, relaxed, his hands folded in his lap. His eyes were half closed, as though he was enjoying the journey, the sound of the storm outside nothing more than background noise to him. He glanced over at Ralvik, as if sensing the commander's thoughts. You're wondering why, Elias said quietly, breaking the silence. Ralvik looked at him, unsure of how to respond. The question of why had been gnawing at him ever since he first saw the human smiling in the cargo bay. Why what? Why I did all this, Elias said with a shrug. Why I freed the creature. Why I smiled when you thought I was a prisoner. Why I didn't just accept my fate like you expected. Ralvik clenched his jaw. You're a fool. You think this is over? The Empire will. Stop, Elias interrupted, raising a hand. The Empire is done. You just don't know it yet. It's been dying for a long time. You just needed the right push. Ralvik's anger flared. The Kortai Empire has stood for over 1,000 years. You can't just end it with one trick. Elias sighed, as if speaking to a child. Ralvik, your empire has been a dying beast for centuries. You've been so busy crushing those beneath you, so focused on your power, that you never noticed how weak you were becoming. The more you conquered, the more enemies you made, and the longer you held onto that power, the harder it would be for you to let go. But all empires fall. That's just the way it is. Your empire just needed a reason to collapse. I gave it one. Ralvik gripped the armrests, his claws digging into the fabric. And the creature? Was that your plan all along? To release a monster and cause destruction? No, Elias said, shaking his head. The creature was never the plan. It was a tool. It was meant to show you something you couldn't see yourself. Fear. Vulnerability. Power doesn't last. It's temporary. And that's why the core tie are weak. Ralvik stood up suddenly, his claws clenching into fists. You talk like you know everything. But I don't believe you. The Empire will rebuild. We will regroup. We? No, Elias said again, his voice steady but firm. You won't. You think you can just rebuild, but the foundation is already broken. The core tie don't know how to rebuild anything. You only know how to destroy. You've spent too long controlling the galaxy through force, through fear. And now, that's all you have left. Ralvik felt a pang of doubt, but he pushed it aside. You talk like this is some kind of revolution. But you're just one man. You can't change the galaxy with just your tricks and games. Elias smiled again, that calm, knowing smile. I don't need to change the entire galaxy. I only need to change one thing. You. Ralvik blinked, confused. What do you mean? Elias leaned forward slightly, his eyes narrowing. I've already changed you. You're sitting here with me, listening to my words. You're not charging back to a command center to fight, to destroy, to defend the empire you've served your entire life. You're not making decisions based on fear anymore. You're questioning your own beliefs. You're beginning to doubt everything you've ever known. That's how a revolution starts. Not with soldiers or armies, it starts with the mind. Ralvik's stomach tightened. You're saying I'm part of this? I'm saying you're the key, Elias said softly. I gave you the choice. You could have stayed behind and fought for a dying empire. You could have clung to your old life. But you didn't. You followed me. That means something. Ralvik opened his mouth to argue, but he couldn't find the words. Elias was right about one thing, Ralvik had made a choice. He had chosen to leave everything behind. He had chosen to follow Elias instead of trying to save the empire. But what did that mean? Was he really ready to accept that everything he had believed in for so long was a lie? The ship lurched suddenly, pulling Ralvik from his thoughts. The storm outside was intensifying. The ship shook, the metal groaning under the pressure. Ralvik grabbed onto the seat, trying to steady himself. Hold on, Elias said, his voice calm despite the chaos around them. Ralvik could hear the storm now, the howling winds mixing with the crackle of lightning. The ship was struggling to stay on course, but it was clear the pilot knew what they were doing. Ralvik's heart raced as the ship banked sharply, turning away from the storm's fury. For a brief moment, he could see the stars ahead, small and distant, their light calm and unbroken. Where are we going? Ralvik asked, his voice tinged with uncertainty. Elias looked up at the stars. Somewhere the Empire can't reach. Somewhere we can begin again. Together. Ralvik's eyes narrowed. You think I'll just abandon everything I've known? You think I'll just follow you too? Wherever you're taking me? Elias met his gaze, his expression unreadable. I don't think you have much choice anymore, Commander. Ralvik didn't respond. He looked out the viewports at the darkened sky, at the distant stars that seemed so far away now. For the first time in his life, he felt truly lost, and for the first time in his life, he felt something else, hope. The ship flew through the storm, its powerful engines cutting through the turbulence as if it was nothing more than a passing breeze. Ralvik sat silently, staring out the viewport at the stars. He still couldn't shake the feeling of uncertainty that clung to him. The Kortai Empire, the empire he had sworn his life to, was gone. The station was destroyed, his soldiers lost, and what was left? A single human who had somehow orchestrated the fall of everything Ralvik had fought for. He glanced at Elias, who sat across from him, seemingly at peace, as if the chaos and destruction they had left behind were nothing more than a bad memory. What now? Ralvik asked, his voice quieter than he intended. Elias looked up at him, his expression unreadable. Now, we begin again. Ralvik's mind raced. How? How can you rebuild anything? How can you just start over after everything that's been destroyed? Elias smiled softly, as if he had been expecting this question. It's not about rebuilding what was destroyed, Ralvik. It's about building something new. Something different. Something stronger. Stronger? Ralvik repeated, his disbelief evident. Stronger than what? The Kortai Empire was the strongest empire in the galaxy. There was no power like it. There was no power like it, Elias said, his voice steady. But power built on fear, on control, is fragile. It's only a matter of time before it falls apart. The Kortai didn't understand that. They only cared about keeping others under their boot. They never stopped to ask themselves if that was what made them strong or what made them weak. Ralvik clenched his fists, his mind spinning. Elias was right in some ways. He had always known that the Empire's control was based on fear. He had seen it in the eyes of the species they conquered, heard it in the whispers of the rebels they crushed, but it had always seemed so powerful. The Empire had always felt invincible. Then what do you think you can build? Ralvik asked. What is your plan, Elias? What's the point of all this destruction? Elias looked at him, his eyes softening slightly. The point is not destruction, Ralvik. The point is freedom. Freedom? Ralvik repeated. He had heard the word before, but it never meant much to him. To a Kortai commander, freedom was a weakness. It was something to be controlled. You think you can just free everyone from what? From themselves? No, Elias said, shaking his head. Not from themselves. From the fear that controls them. From the idea that they have to live in fear, always obeying, always serving some empire, some ruler. The galaxy doesn't need another empire. It doesn't need another war. It needs something better. Ralvik stared at Elias, trying to understand. He had spent his entire life fighting for the Kortai Empire, believing in its power and its unshakable rule. The idea of freedom, of letting go of control, felt impossible. But Elias's words. They were starting to make sense in a way Ralvik couldn't explain. Do you think they'll follow you? Ralvik asked. The species you freed? Do you think they'll just join you? Trust you? They will, Elias said confidently. Because I don't ask them to follow me. I ask them to follow their own path. I don't need to control them. I need to show them that they can choose for themselves. That's what changes everything. People are powerful when they're free. When they know they have a choice. I've seen it happen before. And it's going to happen again. Ralvik looked down at his hands, the claws that had once been weapons of control. He had always believed in the strength of his empire, in the strength of his own power. But now, he felt different. He didn't know what the future held, but he knew one thing. It wasn't going to be what he had always expected. He glanced back at Elias, who was watching him with patience. You're right, Ralvik said quietly. I've spent my life serving a lie. I thought the empire was invincible. But it was built on fear. And fear doesn't last. It just destroys everything. Elias nodded. Fear is a tool. But it's not the only tool we have. And it's not the most powerful one. Ralvik let out a long breath, feeling the weight of everything he had done, everything he had lost. But at the same time, there was something new growing inside him. Something unfamiliar. Something that felt freeing. The ship's engines hummed as they continued to soar through the stars, away from the wreckage of the Kortai Empire and toward something unknown. Ralvik looked out the window again, watching the endless expanse of space spread out before them. What now? He asked again, his voice more sure this time. Elias smiled. Now, we build. Together. Ralvik nodded, a small spark of hope flickering in his chest. The galaxy was big. Bigger than anything he had ever imagined. And for the first time, he realized that he didn't need to control it. He didn't need to conquer it. He just needed to be a part of it. As the ship flew onward, cutting through the storm and toward the stars, Ralvik felt a sense of peace he had never known. The Empire was gone. But something better was beginning. And he was ready to be a part of it.